I never imagined I'd be the kind of mother who had to find out about her son's life through social media posts and secondhand whispers. But that's exactly what happened. It started small: missed phone calls, texts answered days later, excuses about being busy. I thought it was just a phase. I told myself he was adjusting to married life, to adulthood, to responsibilities. That's what mothers do. We explain away the distance because the alternative, that it's intentional, hurts too much to admit. My son's name is Daniel. He used to call me every Sunday. He'd ask about my week, tell me about his classes, sometimes even ask for recipes from when he was a boy. He always said no one made cornbread like I did, but that changed after he married Vanessa. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. She was always polite, too polite. Smiled the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. From the beginning, I had the feeling that she saw me as unnecessary. A relic from Daniel's past, not part of his future. Still, I made every effort to be kind. I brought her flowers the first time I visited their apartment. I complimented her cooking even though I could tell the chicken was dry. I even offered to help plan their wedding, but she told me it was already under control. I ended up seated near the back, at a table with coworkers of Daniel's I'd never met before. After they married, the phone calls changed. Vanessa would answer more often than Daniel. She'd say he was tired or busy or just stepped out. Eventually, I stopped calling as much. I didn't want to be a burden, but the invitations, or lack of them, became impossible to ignore. Daniel didn't invite me to his first firm event. I saw the pictures later on Vanessa's Instagram. There he was, smiling with his coworkers, Vanessa clinging to his arm, and a caption that read, "So proud of my man." One of the comments said something like, "Your mom must be so proud." Vanessa replied, "We're lucky to have his second mom here with us. Second mom." That's what she called her own mother. But I wasn't mentioned. Not once. At first, I told myself it was just an oversight. Maybe Vanessa didn't want to make it about family. Maybe Daniel asked her not to post about me. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But it kept happening. I wasn't invited to his mock trial finals at law school. I found out about it from Martha, the neighbor across the street whose grandson goes to the same university. She said she saw Daniel on a program pamphlet. When I asked Daniel about it days later, he said it was just a school thing and didn't want to make a big deal. That same month, there was a dinner to honor the top graduates. Again, I found out by accident. This time from the mother of another student who stopped me in the grocery store. She said, "You must be so proud of your son. That speech he gave was so moving." I nodded. I had no idea what she was talking about. I cried in the car that day, not because I wasn't invited, not just because of that, but because it felt like I didn't exist anymore, like I had been quietly erased. Still, I kept giving him chances. I told myself he was stressed, that maybe Vanessa didn't think I'd be comfortable. I even convinced myself at one point that they were protecting me from being overwhelmed. But the real reason became clearer each time it happened. I remember one conversation in particular. I had called to ask if I could take Daniel to lunch, to celebrate his internship. Vanessa answered. She said, "He's not really doing celebrations right now. It makes him anxious." "Anxious?" I asked. "He said he feels a lot of pressure when people expect too much. He needs space to breathe," she said. I didn't argue. I thanked her for letting me know and hung up. But that night, I stared at the wall in the dark and wondered when exactly I became a source of pressure in my own son's life. A few weeks later, I saw a post, again on Vanessa's profile. A picture of Daniel in a conference room, arms crossed, standing next to his mentor. The caption said, "Another milestone. He wouldn't be here without the strong woman who raised him." There was a heart emoji and a tag, Vanessa's mother. Again, I wasn't mentioned, I wasn't tagged, and the photo had nothing to do with me. I kept quiet. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want to come off as dramatic. But inside, I was breaking piece by piece. I tried to bring it up once. I asked him gently, "Daniel, is there a reason you don't tell me about your events anymore?" He paused for a second, then said, "Mom, it's just easier this way. Vanessa handles all that stuff now. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just easier this way." I started collecting the moments, small pieces of proof that I still existed in his world. A forwarded email from his university, a glimpse of his name in the alumni newsletter, a birthday card that arrived late, unsigned. Each one became a fragile reminder that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't been completely forgotten. But there were no calls, no visits, no invitations. Then came the day Martha knocked on my door again. This time she was excited. "Did you hear? Daniel's graduating next Saturday. I saw his name on the program when I went to see my grandson's department listing." My chest tightened. "Next Saturday?" I repeated. She nodded. "Isn't that wonderful? You must be so proud." I thanked her and closed the door slowly. My hands were shaking. I hadn't heard a word from Daniel. No email. No phone call. Nothing. For days, I kept expecting the phone to ring. I kept telling myself maybe it was a surprise. Maybe he wanted to call me the day before. Maybe there would be a last-minute invite. But the days passed, and the silence grew. Heavier. Vanessa posted a picture of his graduation cap laid out with his gown. "Almost time," she wrote, and then, "So grateful to the woman who made this all possible." I didn't even feel anger anymore, just a cold, dull ache, like I was standing outside my own life, watching it unfold without me. That Saturday morning, I got up before sunrise. I ironed a dress I hadn't worn in years. I brushed my hair, put on a bit of lipstick, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, older than I remembered. But my eyes were steady. I bought a small bouquet of white lilies and left the house alone. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just got in the car and drove toward the university auditorium, toward the place where my son would stand in, a cap and gown, where people would clap for him, where speeches would be made about legacy and effort and the people who helped him get there, and I would sit in the back and I would watch, whether he wanted me there or not. The drive to the university was longer than I remembered. I kept checking the GPS, even though I knew exactly where I was going. I had been there a few times years ago when Daniel first enrolled. I'd dropped him off on move-in day with a trunk full of bedding, snacks, and notebooks I'd bought on sale. He hugged me briefly and rushed off with Vanessa, who had come with her own parents. I waited in the parking lot for a while, just in case he forgot something. He never came back. That was 4 years ago. I hadn't been back since. I parked on a side street, several blocks from the main auditorium. I didn't want anyone to see me getting out of my old car or recognize me near the front. My hands were damp against the steering wheel. I sat there for a minute before picking up the flowers. They'd wilt a little in the heat, but they were fresh enough. There was no ticket in my hand, no seat assigned, no reserved spot for the mother of the graduate. I walked past the crowd slowly, avoiding eye contact. Families gathered in groups, taking pictures, laughing, pointing, fathers in suits, mothers with corsages, grandparents leaning on canes. I saw one family holding a sign that said, "We love you, Jordan." Everyone was smiling. I didn't bring a sign. Just the lilies. I made my way to the back rows of the auditorium, where there were still empty seats. No one questioned me. No one asked who I was. I found a spot near the end of the aisle and sat down quietly. I clutched the flowers in my lap and looked down at the program I'd picked up at the entrance. There it was. His name, Daniel Peterson. Juris Doctor. I read it 3 times. I felt something rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. The lights dimmed slightly as the ceremony began. The dean spoke first, welcoming everyone and congratulating the students. She talked about hard work, dedication, and the support of family. The camera panned slowly across the audience for the live stream. I looked away. Soon, the graduates began walking in. They entered from the side doors, filing down the aisle in rows of black robes. The room erupted in cheers. I stood up like everyone else, craning my neck. There he was, Daniel. Tall, serious, focused. His eyes scanned the room briefly. I stood, very still. I don't think he saw me, or maybe he did and looked right past me. Vanessa sat up front with her parents. I recognized them immediately. Her mother wore a cream suit and held a bouquet even bigger than mine. Her father held a camera, already snapping pictures. They were positioned in the perfect seats for the best view. The announcer read names one by one. Graduates stepped onto the stage to receive their diplomas. When Daniel's name was called, a wave of cheers echoed through the room. Vanessa clapped first, standing up. Her mother followed, her voice clear. "That's my son." That word hit me in the chest. Daniel smiled as he accepted his diploma. He shook the dean's hand, turned to pose for a photo, and gave a small nod toward the front row. I waited for him to glance toward the back. He didn't. The ceremony moved on. More names, more clapping. My hands were tight around the stems of the flowers now. The petals were starting to curl under the pressure. I stayed seated until the very end, watching as graduates threw their caps in the air. Families rushed toward the stage. I waited until the crowd thinned before getting up. As I reached the main corridor, I paused near the photo backdrop they'd set up for graduates and their families. Daniel was already there. Vanessa adjusted his robe collar while her father took pictures. Then she handed her mother the phone and they posed together. Vanessa, her mother, and Daniel, arm in arm. No one else was invited into the frame. I stood by a pillar, unnoticed, maybe ignored, I don't know. A woman beside me tapped my arm, gently. She looked about my age, holding her own program. "Wasn't that lovely?" she said. "Yes," I answered quietly. "Do you have a child graduating?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yes, Daniel Peterson." "Oh, Daniel." Her face lit up. He was in my niece's class, such a bright young man, and so sweet to his mother. "She's here somewhere. Blonde woman in a cream suit. I think she teaches somewhere, right?" I didn't respond right away. I looked over again. Vanessa's mother was laughing with someone else now, saying something I couldn't hear. Daniel stood beside her, relaxed, smiling. "That's not his mother," I said calmly. "I am." The woman blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed—" "It's fine," I said, forcing a smile. She backed away awkwardly, and I took that as my cue to leave. I walked down the hallway toward the side exit, passing tables with leftover programs and half-empty water bottles. At the door, I stopped again. I couldn't let it end like that. I turned back, walked toward the area where families were still gathered. I saw Daniel standing near a group of faculty, talking to one of his professors. I waited until the professor walked away, then stepped forward slowly. He turned, saw me, and froze. "Mom," he said, almost under his breath. I held out the flowers. I wanted to say congratulations. He looked around quickly, then took a step closer. "You shouldn't be here. I wanted to see you graduate." "You could have called," he said, his voice low. "I tried. You never answered." He glanced past me. Vanessa was walking over now, her expression hard. "Daniel," she said sharply, "can I speak with you for a second?" "Vanessa, please," he said, holding up a hand. "Just wait." She crossed her arms but stepped back. I looked at him again. "You didn't tell them I was coming. You didn't tell anyone I exist, did you?" "That's not fair," he said, his voice rising slightly. "It's complicated." "No, Daniel," I said. "It's actually very simple." He looked away. "I didn't want any drama." I nodded slowly. "You think me showing up quietly in the back of a room is drama?" He didn't answer. "Do you really believe pretending I'm not part of your life makes it easier?" I asked. He shook his head. "It's easier this way." I stared at him, suddenly calm. "For you." He didn't look at me again. Vanessa returned and took his arm. "Let's go," she said firmly. Daniel gave a small nod, then walked away with her. He didn't look back. I stood there for a long time after that, still holding the flowers. Then I left them on a nearby bench and walked out into the sun. I didn't go straight home after leaving the auditorium. I sat in the car for a long time with the door still open, just listening to the sound of people walking by, laughing, celebrating. Families carried flowers, balloons, framed photos. Some were headed to lunch. Others took group pictures near the university fountain. I waited until the crowds thinned before starting the engine. The bouquet I had brought was gone. I hadn't gone back for it. I told myself it didn't matter, but when I saw it sitting, on the bench, untouched, as I drove past the courtyard on my way out, something about that image stuck with me. The ride home felt longer than usual. Not because of traffic, but because I kept reliving every second of that hallway conversation. The way Daniel's voice dropped when he told me I shouldn't be there. The way Vanessa stepped in as if I were a problem to be managed. The way he looked away when I asked if he had told anyone who I was. I walked into my house and set my purse on the table. The house was quiet. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the floor, trying to understand how we got to this point. I raised Daniel alone. After his father passed, I did everything I could to give him stability. We didn't have much, but I worked overtime, took part-time shifts wherever I could. Schools, nursing homes, grocery stores. I paid for his after-school programs, music lessons, SAT prep. I skipped meals some weeks so he could have what he needed. I thought that counted for something. When he got accepted into college, I remember crying on the kitchen floor, not because I was sad, but because I had made it. He had made it. It was the proudest moment of my life. And now, here I was, standing outside a life he built where I no longer had a place. For the next few days, I didn't hear from him. No call, no message, not even a text to ask if I got home safely. I didn't reach out either. I needed time to figure out what to do with all the pieces he left me holding. I thought that would be the end of it. I assumed I'd go back to my usual routine, quiet mornings, grocery runs, volunteering once a week at the library. But that Tuesday, I got a call, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hi, is this Mrs. Peterson?" "Yes," I said. Cautious. "This is Judith Langston, Associate Dean at Eastwell Law." I sat up straighter. "Yes, of course. I wanted to thank you for coming to the graduation ceremony." I froze. "How did you—" "I recognized you from a photo." Daniel had one in his old scholarship file. I was the faculty advisor who handled his aid paperwork his first year. "Oh, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened in the hallway. I saw the way you were spoken to. I didn't want to interfere, but it didn't sit right with me." I said nothing. "Can I ask you something?" she continued. "Do you mind if we meet for coffee?" That's how I found myself 2 days later sitting across from Judith at a small cafe near campus. She was polite, soft-spoken, mid-50s, with a calm, deliberate way of speaking. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble," she said. I think something about this situation is off." I nodded. "I'm used to being forgotten at this point." "You shouldn't be," she said simply. Then she opened her bag and slid a small folder across the table. "I probably shouldn't be showing you this," she said, "but I think you deserve to see it." Inside were 3 printed pages. A student spotlight article written for the law school's newsletter. Daniel's picture was at the top. The headline read, "Raised by Resilience. Daniel Peterson's Journey from Loss to Leadership." I read the opening paragraph. After losing both his parents early in life, Daniel Peterson was raised by his maternal grandmother, a retired teacher who instilled in him the value of hard work, education, and community. My hand trembled slightly as I continued reading. He often credits his grandmother, who passed away during his sophomore year, as the person who gave him the foundation to succeed. I looked up at Judith. "His grandmother?" She nodded. "He submitted this himself. We took his word for it." I kept reading. Without the safety of a traditional nuclear family, Daniel built his own sense of belonging. He was adopted emotionally by his now wife's family, who supported him through law school like their own. "He told them I died?" I asked, my voice flat. Judith's eyes lowered. "Yes, that's how we all understood it." I couldn't speak. Judith took a breath. I don't want to judge him. Students sometimes reshape their story, especially when they think it will help them process their own pain. But this wasn't a stretch of the truth. This was a rewrite. I never left him, I whispered. I never abandoned him. I was there every day of his life until he left for college. I know, she said gently. That's why I called you. I stared at the table for a long moment. I wasn't even sure what to feel. Anger, shame, hurt, disbelief. It all sat in my chest like concrete. He didn't even need to do this, I said. He had scholarships. He didn't need sympathy. I think it was about something else, she said. Control, image, maybe shame. I paid for his college application fees, I muttered. I helped him write his essays. Judith reached across the table and placed her hand lightly on mine. I just thought you should know, she said. I nodded, my throat tight. As I walked out of the cafe, the article still in my hand, I realized something. This wasn't about being forgotten anymore. It wasn't even about being excluded. Daniel hadn't just left me out. He had erased me. He had replaced me with a narrative that fit better with whatever version of himself he was trying to be. And for the first time since the graduation, I wasn't just sad. I was furious. I thought about what Judith showed me every hour of that night. I barely slept. I sat up in bed with the lamp on, reading the article again and again. Each time I reread it, I caught another detail. The way he said his grandmother taught him everything about sacrifice. The part where he said he worked 2 jobs in high school with no family to lean on. The quote where he thanked Vanessa's parents for stepping in when he had no one else. It was a lie. A long, layered, deliberate lie. And the more I processed it, the more I realized this wasn't just about graduation or appearances. Daniel didn't just exclude me. He replaced me with someone else entirely. He created a version of his life that was easier to present, neater, cleaner. And in that version, I didn't exist. On Friday, 4 days after the ceremony, I got a call. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from Caroline, a friend of mine from church. You didn't tell me Daniel was honored at the legal conference yesterday. What? I asked. She went on. Yes, it was all over the Eastwell Law website this morning. There's a video. He gave a speech, a really nice one. They even had Vanessa's mom on stage. I didn't ask anything else. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went online. I found the video. It was a conference celebrating graduates who had shown exceptional leadership in the face of adversity. Daniel stood at the podium, calm and confident, accepting an award. He wore a tailored suit and spoke into the microphone without hesitation. I want to thank the woman who raised me, he said, who gave me shelter when I had no one. She didn't have to do it, but she did it with love and conviction. And she taught me that real family is about action, not blood. The camera cut to Vanessa's mother in the front row. She wiped her eyes and smiled. That was the moment I made up my mind. The next morning, I dressed, grabbed a folder, and drove back to the university. I knew they were holding a networking event on campus for the recent graduates. I had read about it on the law school's page. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I had to say something. I didn't want to scream or embarrass him. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth to exist in the same space as his fiction. I arrived early and sat in the lounge area outside the auditorium, folder in hand. It held copies of old documents, Daniel's birth certificate, school report cards signed by me, photos of us at his high school graduation, a letter of recommendation I wrote for his college application, the rent receipts from when I paid, his housing deposit freshman year. I didn't plan on using any of it, but I brought it, just in case I needed to remind myself that I hadn't imagined everything. People started arriving. Faculty, graduates, families. I saw Vanessa before I saw him. She was chatting with a group of women, holding a drink in one hand, nodding with the kind of confidence that comes from being treated as someone important. Daniel entered a few minutes later, greeting colleagues, shaking hands, laughing. He looked comfortable, at ease. I waited. When the event was fully underway, I stood and walked into the main room. The conversations lowered when people noticed me, but no one said anything. I wasn't dressed like a guest. I wasn't holding a glass of champagne. I wasn't part of their group. Daniel spotted me just as he was stepping away from a conversation. His entire face changed. He walked over quickly, jaw tight. "Mom," he said under his breath. "What are you doing here?" "I saw your speech," I replied. "I thought maybe I could stop by and say hello." "You need to go," he said. "Seriously, this is not the place." "You told them I was dead," I said. He flinched. His eyes darted around the room. "Keep your voice down. You told the university your grandmother raised you. That you had no family." "I didn't say you were dead," he said sharply. "You said you had no one. You erased me. That's the same thing." He stepped closer. "This isn't the place, okay? You want to talk? We'll talk later." "No," I said firmly. "We won't." Vanessa was now walking over. Her eyes were narrowed, already annoyed. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Daniel opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. "Yes. There is." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cause a scene. But I looked Vanessa in the eye and said, "You have gone out of your way to keep me at a distance from my own son. You've let people believe I was never in his life. You stood by while he rewrote his entire history." "I haven't done anything," she snapped. "You knew the story," I replied. "You knew it wasn't true, and you said nothing." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "I'm reminding him of who he is." Daniel stepped between us. "I think you should leave." I looked at him for a long time. "You can lie to them," I said quietly, "but you know the truth. And I think you hate that I know it too." "I don't owe you anything," he muttered. "You owe me everything," I said. "You just don't have the decency to admit it." Vanessa grabbed his arm. "We're done here," I nodded. "Yes, we are." I turned and left. No one followed me. No one stopped me. When I got back to the car, I sat in the driver's seat, breathing hard, not from nerves, but from the sudden weight of how far gone he really was. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, the folder still unopened on the passenger seat. That was the moment I finally accepted the truth. Daniel wasn't confused. He wasn't manipulated. He wasn't pressured by Vanessa. He had chosen this. He had chosen to forget me. And now I was choosing to stop trying to be remembered. After I left the auditorium that day, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, internal. A kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't proud of what happened. I didn't go there to expose Daniel or embarrass Vanessa. But for the first time in a long time, I said what needed to be said, and that came with a cost. 3 days passed. No calls, no messages. Then, on the 4th day, a knock on the door. I opened it slowly, already knowing who it would be. Daniel stood there, wearing a sweatshirt, no jacket, his hands in his pockets. His eyes were bloodshot, maybe from lack of sleep, maybe from something else. He didn't speak at first. "Can I come in?" he finally asked. I didn't move. I looked at him for a moment, then stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around like he barely recognized the place. The living room hadn't changed. Same couch, same rug, same framed photo of him at age 12 on the bookshelf. The last school portrait before he stopped letting me hang those up. He sat on the edge of the armchair, shoulders tense. "I don't even know where to start," he said. I sat on the couch and waited. Daniel rubbed his hands together. "You really think I meant to hurt you?" "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know." He flinched. "I was just trying to have a clean story," he continued. "People like stories that make sense. People understand raised by a grandmother. That sounds like adversity. That sounds inspiring. They don't want the complicated truth." I stared at him. "You think the truth is complicated because it includes me." He looked down. "You weren't some abandoned child, Daniel. You had a mother, one who showed up to every parent-teacher conference, who worked night shifts to keep the lights on, who gave up her own future so you could build yours." "I know you did a lot," he said. "No," I cut in. "You don't. If you did, you wouldn't have done what you did. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what it's like, being surrounded by people with perfect backgrounds, money, connections. I didn't have any of that. I had to make people see me differently. So you erased me, I said. You edited me out so your story would play better to strangers. I never meant for it to get this far. But it did, I said. And you let it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Vanessa didn't force me. I nodded. I know. He looked up. You always said I'd understand when I had kids of my own. Maybe you were right, but I don't know if I want them to know this version of me. Then change, I said. It's not that simple. It is, I replied. You tell the truth. You own it. And you stop pretending you're an orphan when you're not. His mouth opened, then closed again. He stood up and paced toward the window. You think I'm a monster? He said. No, I answered. I think you're weak. He turned sharply. I think you wanted the benefits of being seen as someone who overcame hardship without the reality of having to acknowledge who helped you get there. I didn't ask you to sacrifice, he snapped. That was the moment everything inside me went quiet. I stood slowly. You didn't have to ask. I did it because I was your mother. He shook his head. I never asked you to stay up those nights, or to cancel those vacations, or to work double shifts. No, Daniel, you didn't. But you took the benefits of it. Every scholarship application, every meal, every ride, every time I put your needs ahead of mine. You make it sound like I owe you forever. You owe me the truth, I said, and the bare minimum of respect. He looked away again. I can't undo it. No, I said. You can't. We stood in silence. Then I said, you don't need to fix it. You need to live with it. Daniel swallowed hard. So what now? Now, I said. I stopped chasing you. I stopped asking for scraps. I stopped pretending that just because I gave birth to you, I have to keep allowing you to step on me. His expression shifted. Not anger, not sadness. Fear. I walked to the door and opened it. You can leave now. You're kicking me out? No, I said. I'm setting a boundary. He didn't move at first. Then he walked slowly toward the door. When he stepped outside, he paused. Do you hate me? I looked him in the eye. I hate what you did, but I'm not carrying that anymore. You are. He nodded, like he already knew. I closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just sat on the couch and stared at the blank TV screen. For the first time since all this started, I wasn't waiting for a call or an apology. I wasn't hoping for anything. I was done. And that kind of silence, the one you choose, it's different than the one forced on you. It's stronger. 6 months went by. I didn't hear from Daniel again. No apology, no explanation, no message asking if we could talk. I never expected much, but I thought maybe he'd at least try. That didn't happen. The silence just became normal. At first, it was hard. Everything in the house reminded me of him. The shelf in the hallway still had photos of his graduation from high school, the real one, the one where I was the one holding the camera. The freezer still had the soup I made for him the last time he came home sick from college. I started cleaning things out, not out of spite, just to stop being surrounded by pieces of someone who had already moved on. Then something happened. A woman named Cheryl from the community center called. I had volunteered there years ago before Daniel left for school. She remembered me from the reading program. She asked if I wanted to return. They had a new literacy initiative for women over 50 and needed someone to help with organization. I said yes without thinking too hard about it. That's how it started, a quiet return to myself. I started waking up earlier, taking walks, reading again. I began attending workshops at the library. I took a community finance class, something I'd always told myself I didn't have time for. I joined a lunch group with a few women my age, most of them widows or divorced, all of them carrying their own disappointments. We talked about everything: family, regret, how much we gave up for people who never said thank you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge. It was just life. Real life. Then, out of nowhere, An email arrived in my inbox. Subject: Alumni Appreciation. Brunch from Eastwell Law School. I nearly deleted it, but one line stopped me. Honoring family members who supported this year's graduates. At the bottom was a list of names, people being recognized posthumously. A special feature would highlight graduates who overcame loss. One of the profiles was Daniel's. I clicked. His entry read, Daniel Peterson credits his strength to the eye, memory of his late grandmother, who raised him after he lost his parents at a young age. This brunch honors her lasting impact. It wasn't even subtle anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just felt a kind of stillness, like reaching the bottom of a long staircase and realizing there's nowhere else to go. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't call the school. I didn't argue. Instead, I went to a quiet printer shop in town. I printed my own copy of the article. Then I took a red pen and crossed out every lie, every phrase that didn't belong. I put it in a folder and filed it away in a drawer. Not to keep as evidence, just as a reminder that I wasn't crazy. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a woman named Felicia Rains. She was part of a nonprofit that supported mothers of first-generation college graduates. Apparently, someone had mentioned me during a conference. I never found out who. We're doing a recognition ceremony, she said, for women who made sacrifices that were never publicly acknowledged. It's a small group, not flashy, but meaningful. We'd like to invite you. I told her I wasn't sure I was the right person. You are, she said simply. The event was held in a small ballroom downtown. Modest, no stage, just a podium, and folding chairs. The other women looked like me, tired, steady, worn down in familiar ways. We shared stories. Some cried. Most didn't. There was a quiet dignity in the way they talked about being overlooked, taken for granted, used. When it was my turn, I stood at the podium. I didn't give a speech. I didn't name names. I said this: sometimes the people we love decide that our part in their story is too inconvenient to keep. So they rewrite it. They change the beginning. They change the ending. And suddenly we're gone. But we were there. We raised them. We showed up. We made the quiet choices that nobody noticed. And without us, they would have never made it to the pages they claim now. So even if they won't say it, we can. The applause was soft. No cameras, no flashing lights, but someone recorded it. I didn't know until weeks later. The video was shared on a small advocacy group's page. From there, it reached a forum on invisible caregiving, then a national network. The video didn't mention my name, but the words resonated, and then something I never expected happened. I got a message. Not from Daniel, from a young associate at the law firm where Daniel worked. She said she saw me speak and recognized the story. I've worked with Daniel, she wrote. We didn't know, we thought. Something else. I'm sorry. It didn't change anything. But it reminded me that truth has a way of finding its own exit route. 3 months later, I was invited to attend a civic event downtown. The same young associate arranged it. She'd started a new project about family narratives and resilience in law. It wasn't about Daniel. It wasn't about me. But she wanted me in the audience. I almost didn't go, but something in me was curious. So I went. The room was full, small venue, mostly students. At one point, they opened the floor to share stories. One woman stood up and talked about raising her grandson after her daughter passed. Another described raising her brother while their parents were in and out of rehab. Then, the associate introduced a final segment, silent recognition. No speeches, just a walk across the room with a flower for anyone who wanted to honor someone unrecognized. They started playing quiet music. One by one, people walked forward with a flower. And then I saw him. Daniel. Standing at the back of the room, near the side wall. I froze. He looked older, thinner. He didn't make eye contact, but he held a single white flower in his hand. He didn't step forward. He didn't approach me. He just stood there, holding the flower until the music stopped. Then he placed it on the table with the rest and left without saying a word. I never followed him. I didn't wave. I didn't stand. I just watched him disappear out the same side door I once exited, alone, after his graduation. That night, I walked home without sadness, not because he came, not because he didn't speak, but because for the first time he saw me. He didn't get applause, he didn't get forgiveness, but he saw me. And from now on, he'd never be able to say again that I wasn't there,